Hi, my name is John Wiggins, and welcome to The Moderator. Today we have on our show Dr. Reginald Meebang, who's going to be discussing the subject matter of diversity in America, then and now. Dr. Reginald Meebang.
Call me Reggie, please.
No problem. I've been knowing you for a couple of years now, so that shouldn't be a problem. Today we're going to be discussing the diversity in America, then and now. And we're also going to be talking about the matter of you're writing a new book.
Right, a new book.
If I understand.
Right.
And what is the name of the book and what is it about?
Well, the end title is To Be Determined, but I'm actually elaborating on a previous book that I wrote that was called Black Survival in the Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not it ends up being called that is to be determined, but I'm actually starting it this month, and hopefully within the next 6 months to 10 months I'll be finished.
Okay, and what's spurring on this particular book?
Well, as you know, I spent 24 years in corporate America. I worked my way up from FedEx to chief operating officer of one of their companies.
Mm-hmm.
Took an early retirement from them. Now I've been a senior executive with the government now for about 10 years. And so I've amassed within that time frame a lot of stories in my life, from real life, about the things and the people that I've encountered
mm-hmm.
in terms of how you survive in systems, going back to when I was a child and using the same set of skills that I did as a child to survive in corporate America and also as a senior executive in the government.
When you was writing when you was working with Federal Express,
mm-hmm.
you was also, I believe, in the diversity also, wasn't you?
Yes, at one point I was a preceptor at the FedEx Leadership Institute, and I oversaw the diversity curriculum and training for the entire corporation.
So as being a part of that division, where was your earlier life a big part in your being able to handle that position?
Yes, you know, as you know, when we grew up in North Memphis,
mm-hmm.
Coming from impoverished backgrounds, a lot of times on the streets we encountered situations in our life from grade school to high school where we had to actually use a certain set of skills to survive.
Right.
Those skills entail things like being able to do an environmental scan, understanding the danger and the pitfalls around you, assessing who has the power in whether it's the streets or the corporate boardroom, and also being able to build relationships and alliances so that you can, in essence, survive within that system. We learned that as we grew up on the streets, as you know. Many times our lives were in danger because of some of the situations that we faced. And
right.
then you take that and you fast forward to myself, for example, being in the 9th grade, and as a poor kid, you know, running a scholarship to Exeter Academy Prep School,
right.
you know, going from, you know, never having flown on a plane to going to school in New England with some of the most privileged kids in the world. And then you transfer that to a situation where graduating from Northside High School, which we both did, and winning a scholarship like I did to the Air Force Academy, and again,
right.
going from nothing to some situation that allows you to be with some of the most privileged people in the world, the same set of skills that it took us to survive those situations throughout our life are the same set of skills that I use in mm-hmm. those situations, and then transferring that to corporate America and the boardroom by being able to do the environmental scan, understanding how to build relationships, understanding the supply chain, building alliances. Those
right.
same set of skills helped me to be a successful corporate executive for a number of years at the highest levels. And then reinventing myself once
mm-hmm.
again from that career in corporate America to becoming a senior executive in the federal government, coming into the federal government at the equivalent of being an admiral or a general, which is what the senior executive service is all about.
Right.
And for the last 10 years, using those same skills now to survive and to be successful. Not just to survive, but to thrive in those environments. I go back to the premise originally in that it's the same set of skills.
Okay, well, let's go back a little bit earlier before you were employed in the government mm-hmm. and into the corporate world. When you was first going into the school, let's say the Exeter School,
mm-hmm.
When you first got there,
mm-hmm.
the skill sets that you had coming from a school in North Memphis,
right.
and then ending up at a school where there was quite a bit of privileged individuals,
mm-hmm.
what was your first take on that?
Well, it's the story of our life. You look around, there's only a few of us.
Right.
So And one of the things that I had to, that I learned very quickly is that success is not a matter of where you are. Success is a matter of where you are from where you first had to start. So the fact that we grew up, poor, to me, it's where you start that matters in terms of the difference that you are able to distinguish between yourselves and the others. And with kids that perhaps have had privilege all their life. So I measured my success not about where I was, but about where I was from where I started. The fact that I was there, to me, in and of itself, was a success story. But there was also something always inside of me that taught me about the value of our history as African Americans, and never forget that. That was drilled into me by my teachers and my mentors, understanding the history of the civil rights movement. I saw, for example, in that school, there was a guy that I went to school with, and he was African American. His name was Leroy. And there were only about 8 of us during that first summer session.
Okay.
And there was a distinct difference between the rest of us and Leroy, in the sense that we all banded together because people have a tendency to want to be around people that are like them. But he never saw himself as African American. And there was something about him in that situation that, reminded me that I never want to be that way. I want to always value my history. Being an African American and having come from where we came from is a source of pride for me. Okay. Not something that I use as a hammer, but as a tool to help make me better and to be more aware and also to put back. I never wanted to be like him.
Did you feel that at some point that he felt that he had to fit in order to be able to move forward and move ahead by disassociating himself from who he actually was?
I really don't know what his psychological motivation was because he never really talked to us about what it was, so we only speculated. But there was one thing that was always true and certain in my heart, and that is that the color of my skin is who I am. And that's something that I take a source of pride in. And it was also something that was drilled into me a long time ago, that no matter where you are or what level, you have a responsibility to put something back, to help as many other people as you can, wherever you are and at whatever level you are. I don't have to be a billionaire, I don't have to be a millionaire, but wherever I am, I have a responsibility to those that are like me, whether I'm in corporate America or whether I'm in this prep school, to help others as much as I can.
What do you tell the young people out there what to expect when they get to where you are now?
I think the important thing to tell them, whether they're in corporate America or in life, is to really understand the systems where you are, whether you're in a school system, whether you're in a corporate system or a corporate setting, or whether you're in a neighborhood, is really understanding the system and being able to choose good mentors and to help understand what the rules of the game are. You can look at an organizational chart, it doesn't always tell the entire story. There's the organizational chart that is public facing, but there's always a story behind the story. So you have to have an intuition inside of you and a skill where you are able to do an environmental scan to understand what the unwritten rules are, because there are unwritten rules in every system, in every neighborhood, in every organization. And the only way to do that is to really choose people within that system that you trust that can help mentor you along. Many times those people aren't necessarily people that look just like you. Some of the best mentors in my life have been white females who saw potential in me to write letters to send me to a prep school, who have seen potential in me to support me as an executive in the corporate setting. But it's been people that not necessarily have looked like me, and there have been some that do look like me, but the mentor may not necessarily be the person that you think it is. So don't get caught into the trap of thinking that they always have to look like you.
Okay, when we were growing up in Memphis, we didn't have the option,
right?
Nor did we know for sure that we were, well, we knew we were poor, but we didn't really care about being poor because we had family. But we didn't know that we were experiencing racism at the time until we got into situations where it was presented to us first and foremost, blatantly and upfront to us. Once you got into the corporate America, did you ever experience that, and what was your first impression, and how did you handle being experiencing that for the first time?
Well, I think this whole idea of racism has been alive and is alive and well, and I'd be naive if I said it didn't exist. I think this issue of color and stereotypes is with us, at least for our lifetime, but you first have to understand and admit that it is a reality. The first thing that you begin to notice, the higher up the corporate ladder you go, the less the people have a tendency to look like you. And for example, I'm on the board of Sisters of Mercy Health System, which is the 6th largest Catholic health system in the country, about a $4 billion health system, over 30 hospitals, 7 different states. And one of the things that you begin to notice, whether you sitting on the board, is that there is sometimes a lack of diversity. That doesn't mean that they're not committed to it, but you have a responsibility, at least while I'm there, is to try to make sure that in their policies and their practices that they recognize that, and your population that you serve should be a reflection of the people that run that organization. So you really want to try to mirror the population you serve from a diversity standpoint. But you notice as you move up the corporate ladder, the less people have a tendency to look like you, or the less people of color there are. Same thing, within the corporate system. The higher up you go, you have a tendency to see this lack of diversity. Unless you work for an organization that is enlightened to some extent, is making a conscientious effort to try to make sure that there are diverse people among their ranks. So the thing that you have to learn is that no matter what level you are, you have a responsibility, and you have power to try to change that. The first rule of survival, though, is to survive. So the more successful you are, the more you can help other people. So as you get promoted, you become positioned in the situation where you can actually change policy, where you can actually change strategy, where you can actually change the direction of a company or an organization. So the more successful I am, the more I'm committed to try to do that. Not necessarily just for people of color, but for people in general, because the more level the playing field, the more diverse the population, the more diverse the leaders in that organization, you're going to be more successful. There's a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, and that book states this fact from a scientific evidence standpoint, that when you run a decision through a diverse matrix of people and opinions, you get a better decision in the end. That's why on game shows where you see they get a chance to call the audience is almost never wrong. Why? Because there's a great diversity of people out there. Somebody's going to know the answer. Right. So you have to try to put in place an organization that is committed to diversity, because you're going to get a better product, you're going to get better decisions, and you're going to be more productive for the world.
So when you were growing up, and let's say that we both grew up in Carn School and then Humes and Northside, did you notice that a lot of the teachers would be steered toward you for a particular reason and not toward other individuals? And that old cliche is you've got to be twice as good as anyone else to be able to make it. Did they see something in you that they didn't see in a lot of your peers in school?
I think so. And I think what they saw was my commitment to succeed. And I think that what I recognized, as I was moving through that system, is that it wasn't always necessarily about the color of my skin. It was about the kind of character that I had within me. They saw something in me that I think that I got from my early days as a child, and that is, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, and do the best that you can no matter what you've been given. And I think that more than anything else steered teachers and mentors toward me to help me break that cycle of poverty and to succeed. So yes, the color of your skin does matter, but I think even more important than the color of your skin is who you are and what you're made of inside of you in terms of the integrity of how you work and how you live your life.
Because it was a predominantly black school, so there wasn't, let's just say, any other way to determine who was who or who wouldn't know what, except by their numbers and by their character. Right. So if your character is strong and one is well-rounded, then they have a tendency to more or less be steered toward you or steer toward the individual who are displaying those characteristics. If you were, now, well, let's just go back to your book. You're writing a book now.
Yes, I'm writing a book, and it's expanding on the book that I wrote previously called Black Survival in the Corporation. But it goes to this whole issue of the color of your skin and how, as African Americans, going back to the point that you made earlier, we know, and it's drilled into us, that we have to be twice as good. We can't fall prey to this illusion of inclusion at any time, because we are treated differently, because there are stereotypes and people play to those in real life. For example, when somebody gets down to making a hiring decision, at some level, usually at either a conscious or non-conscious level, we want to be around people that are like us. Right. We do that because as human beings, we're ritualistic creatures of nature. And it's just natural for us to choose people that are like us. But what that means in corporate America and other organizations is that many times the folk that are in power are, not like us, and they choose people like them, which leaves us on the outside. So you really want to try to put in place, if you're in a position, systems and practices that build objectivity into the decision making. There's an article in Business Insider magazine just came out last week that says 8 mistakes that our brains make on a daily basis that we continue to make, and how to break those habits. One of those is this whole issue of stereotypes. People play into stereotypes. You know, you to some extent believe these stereotypes and you act on them, and those things end up many times leaving African Americans and minorities out of the loop in terms of power and pay.
So how do you envision African Americans, not only in the past and the present, but in the future, as being able to overcome this quote-unquote stereotype that we're experiencing, even to today?
I don't think to some extent we'll ever get beyond it, because we're human beings and stereotypes can either be positive or negative. I think what we have to do as human beings is be committed to constantly improving how we look at life and how we look at individuals, and being as objective as we possibly can. I think the greatest challenge that we have related to stereotypes is not necessarily that related to color, but the generational differences now with people being in the workplace, from the baby boomers to the traditionalists, you know, to the millennials. People are working longer and living longer, and so the greatest challenge that we have from a diversity standpoint is not necessarily race, but the issue of how do you as a leader relate to people that are from different generations that have different value systems. You know, the same thing that I value at my life stage now is not the same thing that a person coming into the workplace that's a millennial would value. I value traditional things like a pension. I value traditional things like stability. I value things like being able to work on a job for a long time and retire. Well, those values are very different than somebody who's coming into the workplace now that needs to feel more value associated with what they do and the work that they do, and being appreciated, because they're more portable than we were. So it's the generational challenges that we face that are going to be more difficult for us, even beyond race.
Well, of course, once again, we're going back to when we were growing up.
Right.
We didn't necessarily have those type of conversations around the dinner table.
No.
So for the generation that's coming up behind us, are you taking that direction now, as teaching your kids about finances, money, things that are going to be of importance to you as you grow older? Because we, growing up, our parents were mostly were struggling
to survive
and trying to survive, so they didn't have the time nor the knowledge about money and finances that we have the opportunity to know about now. So that's something that we as adults need to make our first priorities, or one of our first priorities to our kids.
Yes, absolutely, because I think, you know, as a former psychotherapist, you know, they're understanding the unconscious mind and how it operates, and the models that we grow up with. You only have a certain window of opportunity to be able to instill those values for your kids. You know, by the time a child is 3 years old, they have concrete operational thinking skills. That means they can weigh rewards and punishment, and they can, you know, tell the difference between right and wrong and make critical decisions. By the time that child is 10 or 12 years old, their culture, value, and belief systems are usually set. And after that, folk don't change a whole lot. It's not to say that we can't change, but something usually has to force us to. So, you know, that's not a big window of opportunity. And I'll just give the best example is I have 25-year-old twin daughters. And, you know, my opportunity in that window is closed for me in terms of trying to influence who they will be when they grow up. So, thank goodness we had an opportunity to instill in them when they were young those things that we believe in: perseverance, integrity, respect for authority, all those things that will help you become a better adult. You can only teach that during those formative years. After that, folk don't change a whole lot. So as I look at them now and see the kind of people that they've turned out, I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, they do have some of the same values that we raised them with. They're their own different human beings in terms of who they are as individuals, but those values are there, and I can see that now in terms of how they interact, in terms of the kinds of job they do and how people look at them, and the kind of lives that they're turning out to be.
When you were, let's just say, when you first got into your last government job that you have now, and that job which takes you all around the world at times, and you see different races, different ethics, different types of race, creed, and colors, everything that you see. Do you see the same type of behavior that you see in other nationalities as you see in African Americans? And do we seem to have a different type of behavior or love for ourselves that, or than other countries or other ethnic races does?
I think yes and no. I think every race is unique. One thing that I do know is that when you look around the world, the best way to look at it is probably through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And yes, as African Americans, we take unique pride in our history and who we are. But you talk to people who are Jewish, you talk to people who are from Scotland or Ireland, everybody has that sense of pride. So we want to think to some extent that ours is the most important, but everybody has that sense of pride. So it's different in terms of how we look at ourselves because of our unique experience. But the one thing that never changes, that wherever you go, at the end of the day, when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, we all want to feel like we're safe from danger.
Right.
We all want to feel like we're secure. We all want to feel that third level of need, that we belong to something, whether it's a gang or whether it's a family. That is something inside of us that drives us to be a part of something that is larger than us. And then there's the whole issue of seeking status and power, and then ultimately becoming self-actualized, which rarely happens. But at the end of the day, that level of need is everywhere you go, in every corner of the globe. You'll see that manifest in every race, creed, or color.
Do we as African Americans seem to be our own worst enemies at times?
Well, I can only speak from my own personal perspective, and I think to some extent, again, I'm going to give you the legal answer, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, in the sense that what I've seen over the years is that I think it goes back to this whole issue of being light-skinned and dark-skinned. You and I have talked about this. The book, Our Kind of People, really does a good job of helping us to understand how this whole issue of being lighter, to some extent, is looked at more favorably in our society. You look at that in terms of having been slaves in the field versus slaves in the house, and then the evolution of that into organizations like the fraternities that we join, and things like Jack and Jill, how those things to some extent are all based on this issue of race and the differences that we have among ourselves. I think being an African American and having grown up with a mixed heritage background, we're harder on ourselves than anybody on the outside could ever be. And those things that we talked about in the past about light skin, dark skin, good hair, not so good hair, we are brutal.
And why do you think that is so?
I think it's because of what was drilled into us once we were taking slaves here in this country, and what we viewed as being better, those things that were lighter than us. And that evolved into fraternities and sororities, and this thing that we have even today where lighters to some extent looked at as being better. That's been proven scientifically with experiments, whether it's the brown-eyed doll, the blue-eyed doll. Those things are alive and well today because of that history.
Do you think that during slavery that was embedded in us intentionally so?
Absolutely.
As to be able to control us, or to control or to deface us within our own ranks?
Well, when you look at racism, it really is not about anything related to logic.
True.
And people are illogical by nature. We'll take the things that we feel strongly about versus what's real and what's true, over those things every time. So to some extent, logic doesn't matter. It goes back to being human beings. And to some extent, yeah, it was all about being able to control, the people who you viewed as less than you because of the economic system that was built around our labor. And by being able to control that labor force and the economics that supported that lifestyle, you had to show that, what you were doing by your prevalence toward your choosing things that were lighter or wider as being better. That was an ideology that helped fuel a way of life.
When we get a little deeper here, when we got our first African American president, there was some belief that, wow, because of this, we're not going to see as much racism. Do you believe that has happened?
No, absolutely not. And I think that anybody who thought that was uninformed and to some extent unenlightened. I think one of the things that you have to realize is that he's not just the first African American president, he's the president of the United States. And he would be equally criticized if he showed prevalence toward one or the other. So I know that as a human being, you know, whether it's the President of the United States or whether or not it's you, and I've seen this by, you know, moving up the corporate ranks, getting to a certain level, people have these expectations of you. Well, the expectations that I have myself are even more important. You know, as I told you many times, you know, I'm always going to be committed to try to help as many people that look like me succeed. But at the same time, I'm not still going to not ignore my obligation to the greater population as well. You have to really balance that. You know, at the end of the day, it's about, you know, trying to make sure you choose the right people who are best for the job. But at the same time, I can't ignore one over the other just because I feel a certain way.
Okay.
It's a healthy tension, you know, that you always keep within you, being committed to yourself and people that are like you, but at the same time, being an equally responsible executive and leader and tending to the flock as a whole.
Okay, well, we're getting close to the end of the show, but I wanted to ask you a question about your book, and if you were be so kind as to let us know when you think that will be coming out, or give us the name of some of the books that you've had before that was out that's directly dealing with racism, and you were being able to deal with diversity in and out of the boardroom.
Right. The first book that I wrote, I think, was around 2001, and the name of that book was I Wish Cotton Was a Monkey. The parenthetical title was Autobiographical Notes from the Ghetto to the Boardroom. It was a fictionalized account of my life to that point with regard to how I went from being that poor kid, you know, in North Memphis to becoming chairman of the Housing and Finance Board for the City of Memphis and serving on other boards and being a successful corporate executive. The second book that I wrote was Black Survival in the Corporation, which was about just that, the unwritten rules in corporate America, how to survive that, and all to, not just survive, but to thrive. The next book is really going to be an expansion of both of those ideas, and the title is to be determined. But it's the last 10 years of my life, I've had a rich plethora of ideas and situations that I want to be able to put down in a way that helps other people to learn. My biography was included in a book called The 10 Laws of Career Reinvention. Came out in 2010. Author's name is Pam Mitchell. It's on the Harvard recommended reading list. I'm proud of that, and it's going to be something like that in the sense that the things that I've learned in terms of how I've survived and used my background as a tool for improvement and not as a hammer to beat other people over the head with, so that others can learn from the challenges that I've faced.
Okay, is there a website or a email that we could contact you, or to be able to get those books from? Still, are they still in publication, or is there? I'm
in negotiations with the publisher now, but if people have ideas about it, they can write me at rmebane, M-E-B-A-N-E, at bellsouth.net. If they have questions about, as we get closer and finalize the negotiations, when it's coming out and when it will be available.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you, Dr. Reginald Mebane, for coming on the show, my friend Reggie, and we look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully when the book comes out, you'll be able to come back and present the book to us. And I would like to thank everyone for watching The Moderator. My name is John Wiggins, and have a great day.